The key area that I will be discussing now is a sample problem with responses. So the following are some problems with responses to a questionnaire which a researcher has to consider carefully. Number one, information from a questionnaire is either an opinion, misinterpretation, a guess, a bias, or an error. So, for example, in a study about the adequacy of library facilities, 50 students rated their own school library as follows. So, 25 said that the facilities of their library were very adequate. 15 said adequate. 10 gave a rating of fairly adequate. 12 gave a rating of inadequate. And 8 very inadequate. So, if there was one correct rating, the others are just mere opinions, guesses, biases, or errors. So the only remedy here is to fall on the weighted average. The second problem with responses is if the respondent is given several choices from which he selects only one answer, he may guess and accidentally chose the right answer. However, if he happens to choose the wrong one, then the study becomes faulty. So this is true in the example as cited in number 1. Number 3, responses to open-ended or freeway questions are hard to tabulate. And when the researcher categorizes subjectively, that is, according to his or her evaluation, he may introduce a bias. So, which is actually true because in a survey questions, you have open-ended questions. So, whatever word the respondent writes in the survey questionnaire, then those are the words that you need to tabulate. So, which is very hard. So that's why if you try to tabulate those kind of data, it may be considered a little bit of a bias because it is based on your own evaluation. Number 4, if a respondent is forced to choose between or among responses, none of which he feels is correct, his answers would be incorrect as well. So to remedy this, add the options a catch-all word such as others and a close open, please specify. So number 5, sometimes respondents fail to include some items in their answers. For example, the question is, how many members are there in your family? So they may fail to include the infants or themselves. Number 6, biased questionnaires influence responses. So it means that in a study, questionnaires were constructed to elicit harsh, lenient, or actual opinions regarding people who commit crimes. So each form of the questionnaire was administered, followed by a standardized attitude scale. Respondents displayed more lenient attitudes after they were exposed to the lenient questionnaire. So the people who received the harsh and neutral questionnaires showed no change. Hence, the way a questionnaire is biased can influence responses. Number 7, some respondents give answers that would make them appear good to the researcher. And if asked if they had read a certain book, they would answer yes, to make them appear as wide readers. So this happens a lot of times. Number 8, in a freeway question, the space allotted for the answer influences the respondent's reply. If the space is small, the respondent may think that the correct reply is short. But if the space is large, the respondents may think that the correct reply is long. Number 9, the choice of words affect responses. In a study by Payne, this is what happened. 2 questions were asked. First, do you think the United States should allow public speeches against democracy? And second, do you think the United States should forbid public speeches against democracy? Now, the opposite of allow is forbid, but this is what happened. As you can notice, this is a sample tabulation, and evidently, there is something very forbidding in the word forbid, that the people are more ready to say that something should not be allowed to be done than to say that it should be forbidden. So Payne also reports that there was a 19% difference in responses given with might, could, and should were used. In number 10, if the question is explicit, respondents may misunderstand the meaning of the term used. In one survey, more than a third of the public admitted that they had no particular concept of profits in mind. So when asked, when you speak of profits, are you thinking of profit on the amount of sales? On the amount of money invested in the business? On year-end inventory or what? The result was more revealing when almost as many said they thought of a year-end inventory base, which is 14%, as the number who thought of the investment, which is 18%. Number 11. Sometimes, in providing a middle answer, definiteness is sacrificed, but broader replies are gained. So respondents are given the option of dodging an issue. For example, do you approve the lifting of martial law? So would you say you approve, no opinion, or disapprove? So now it is safer to say no opinion, but that is dodging the issue. And for number 12, sometimes a question may force an uncomplimentary or undesirable choice on the part of the respondent. Now, to better understand this, there is a two example, a poor question and a better one. Now, in the poor question, you are asked, do you think the salaries of teachers like you are much too high? Now, take note that due to self-esteem, a teacher would not admit that his salary is much too low, but also would not admit that his salary is much too high as well, because he also want an increase. So in order for us to convert that question to a better one, you could ask instead, do you think salaries of teachers like yourselves are check appropriate point? So would you say much too low, somewhat low, about right, somewhat high, or much too high? So that is way much better. Number 13. Sometimes the order in a list of items influences respondents. This means to say that generally respondents chose the items listed first than the items listed somewhere else. And this is true in multiple responses. And finally, for number 14. Sometimes a respondent does not give the true answer if he is asked a direct question, especially if the response is embarrassing, or it would hurt someone, or it may invite trouble. So, in order for us to remedy this, we should make the respondent anonymous or promise that any information about the respondent will be kept confidential. So the next key area that I will be discussing is the evidence of misleading questions. And there are 6 evidences of misleading questions. Number 1, all or none responses. So if all or most of the answers are in the same direction, such as all yes or all no, there is something wrong with the question. An example is, are you in favor of good health? So naturally, the answer is yes, right? Second, considerable difference in responses when the order is changed. Now, this may be a change in the word order of an item or a change in the order of the question. So, this is quite a misleading question as well. And another would be a high proportion of omission or no response. So, if so many questions are left unanswered, either the question is overlooked, or it is unclear, or it is offensive, or there's no place where to write the answers. So if this happens, then the majority of the respondents will have high proportion of omission or no responses to your questions. So if there is no responses, it misleads. Number 4, high proportion of don't know or don't recall. So these responses indicate that the items are improperly stated or inappropriate. So this is why pretesting is necessary to discover these defects. Number 5, high proportion of other answers. So this is an indication that the choices or options for selections are either inadequate or inappropriate. So make sure that enough options should be provided and their appropriateness should be studied carefully as well. And so the respondents would actually choose the selection or options you provided instead of selecting other. And for number 6, considerable number of added comments. So if there are many comments in the margins or at the end of the items, this indicates the enthusiasm of the respondent or weakness of the items. So if the comments are irrelevant, then the items are either unclear or the alternatives are inappropriate. Now, for example, why are you studying to become a teacher? So the options or choices are, I love to teach children, I can have a good job, I want to work in an office. So the options are actually inadequate because The respondents may add, there are not enough choices, and then adds, this is the kind of service I want to render to my people. And besides, I want to work in an office is actually inappropriate because teaching is not working in an office. So it doesn't make sense. So that's all. Thank you.